epoxy-anhydride cure systems have been around really since the 1950s. A lot of early work with epoxy resin technology, and then the slow advent of the anhydride curatives as thermal curatives to supplement other systems that are out there. What can you guys speak to regarding, the early start and maybe the first monoanhydrides that came out, and then the subsequent technologies?
Well, I believe the earliest anhydrides were the maleic and the phthalic anhydride.
Yes, this is really the early stuff,
which were solid anhydrides. And then that was then followed by some of the liquid anhydrides like MTHPA or natric methyl anhydride, etc.
So we're talking 1960s time frame, and here we are still talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Those then help propel these chemistries into applications such as polymer composites, fiber reinforced composites, both with carbon and glass fiber reinforced composite applications. And then, of course, this progress to other types of anhydrides.
So what about those others? Vinay, let's talk a little bit about methylnatric anhydride in terms of when that came onto the scene and how it may have displaced some of the other anhydride technology.
That's right, Boris. I believe that came maybe late 60s, natric methyl anhydride. It was originally a brand name, and now it has become a little bit more just generic term. It's also known as norbornene methyl anhydride.
That's too hard to say.
And then, so that boosted the glass transition temperature capability and chemical resistance capability of epoxy anhydrides a step further when compared to the liquid anhydrides, of course. I'm not including dianhydrides just yet in that comparison. But yes, on the whole, the chemical resistance and the temperature resistance of these all these liquid anhydride-based epoxy composites really lend themselves to a very generic application that all lab chemists see all the time. They touch it. Is a lab countertop.
Yeah, it's pretty hysterical. Nobody thinks about that.
Which is almost exclusively made with epoxy anhydride, heavily filled composite. And yet there is stuff that we see with fiber reinforced composites, like Anand mentioned, and but they're everywhere. These systems everywhere.
So if everything's fine and good, so Jeff, what do you think? Now Gulf Chemical comes along with BTDA, so if everything was fine and good, what was the entry point for BTDA?
Well, a BTDA bringing in a dianhydride as compared to a monoanhydride with increased cross-linking and whatnot, pushed the performance envelope for the resin systems even higher. TGs well into the 200s, chemical resistance, electrical insulation properties were just vastly superior. And in my mind, what I think is that I've seen there is that, they had started with solid monoanhydrides, transitioned to liquids for processability improvements. Now to get the properties, they've got to go back to a solid dianhydride system, which means they've got to relearn the technology in order to incorporate them into an epoxy resin and cure.
But then you've got PMDA, which was on the scene for a while as well.
PMDA-based systems are going to be much more rigid because the PMDA is very rigid.
Backbone structure.
Exactly, and BTDA, because of its bridge, has some flexibility, so you get the increased cross-linking, but at the same time, there's a little bit of flexibility built in.
So we're going from the real simple anhydride type chemistry to a little bit more sophistication on the monoanhydride side, and then we move over to the dianhydrides with different types of cross-linking capabilities.
Exactly.
I just find it fascinating that here we are sitting and talking about 50, 60-year-old technology, and
it's still relevant.
Still a lot of relevant applications in the modern day. That's pretty unusual.
And in the industrial marketplace, you'll find people who are well-versed in the technology, very knowledgeable about anhydride epoxy chemistries, and then there are some who know a little bit about it, and then there's a wide population of users out there that they're not quite familiar with the technology, with the anhydride technology, especially with the ability to use like dianhydrides in a formulation.
Incorporate the solids into a viscous epoxy resin.
So a lot more work to be done.
A lot more work to be done.
Yeah, agreed.
Indeed.